Well, the autumn rain has arrived and we return for a full midweek fixture list in the EFL Championship. Match week 11 sees all 24 teams in action across Tuesday and Wednesday night, with 8 of the games on the first of those two. And today we're going to preview and predict all 12 matches. And I'll encourage you to do the same in the comments below. If you beat or match my overall score, as always, you will get a shout out in the next recap when we return on Thursday to look ahead to the weekend. It's all happening very quickly here in the Championship. We're in the middle of a 3-game match week, but before we go and look ahead to match week 11, let's have a quick look back at last weekend, where finally, after a slow start to the season, I've done my usual and found a little bit of form, because on Saturday and Friday night in particular, I picked up 11 points. 2 perfect scores for Borough's 2-1 win against Ipswich and Millwall's 2-1 win at QPR, and then 5 other correct outcomes for wins for Oxford, Charlton, Coventry, Bristol City and Stoke City leave me on 11 points. Now, it wasn't a particularly bad week for anyone. Nobody got less than 4 points or so. But I did manage to get myself joint top of the table this week. 11 points was the joint highest score. 3 of our other regulars managed to match that total though. So Peter, who's becoming the picture of consistency, Marco and Etienne, well done to all 3 of you who also got 11 points in match week 10. Let's go and have a look ahead to match week 11 though. The full midweek fixture list starts on Tuesday and we have got 8 games, beginning with Blackburn Rovers versus Sheffield United. Blackburn will be hoping the rain doesn't cause the same situation as the Ipswich match a few weeks back, and they really need to find a result, because since then they've been absolutely awful. Beaten comfortably at Charlton, at home to Swansea they lost, drew with Stoke, and now lost away at Coventry with those 2 quick-fire second-half goals. And unfortunately for them, just lacking in a little bit of inspiration, certainly lacking in a little bit of quality in front of goal. It was actually a relatively even match in terms of chances, but the difference was Blackburn created a couple of glorious ones, didn't take them. Coventry have attacking players that were firing and in form, and they were ruthless with them. And that literally was the difference in that game. Blackburn, to be fair, haven't been bad away from home at times this season in terms of performances, maybe Charlton aside. But at home, they've had a really tough time, bar that Ipswich game, of course, that got called off with 10 to go. For Sheffield United, they're coming up against a side who are off the bottom of the table. 2 wins in the last 4 for Chris Wilder. And yes, they're ugly 1-0s. They're not particularly exciting games to watch. But there was a sign in that game that they were a better team throughout. They gave up more of the ball. It's a very different style to what Ruben Sellers was doing. Yes, Watford had a couple of great chances, and we've mentioned the fact that Sheffield United looks so vulnerable at the back. But they took one. They had a lot more of the ascendancy, a lot more opportunities created. Still not convinced by them yet, but they're starting to pick up points, and that is absolutely pivotal. So going into this one, it's a bit of a tough one to call. Obviously, a win for either will likely take them out of the relegation zone, but they've only managed 1 draw between them in 19 games this season, and I'm going to bank on that to change on Tuesday night. I was very tempted to go 1-0 to Blackburn, but I just don't trust them at home at the moment. So I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline to start of 1 goal apiece, and I'll let you into a little spoiler alert here. I've gone quite low scoring this midweek, which may prove to be very stupid. We'll see. 1-1 to start us off. As we move on to the 2 sides that may well end up in the relegation zone, depending on who gets a win in that first match, because it is Derby County versus Norwich City. Both sides had a little bit more expectation and optimism going into this season, and both are flattered to deceive in truth. No win in the last 6 for Norwich, none in the last 5 for Derby either. Both struggling to score goals at the moment. Norwich 2 in their last 4, Derby 3 in their last 5. The only thing you could possibly say compared to earlier in the season is that Derby are looking a little better defensively of the 2. But that's in terms of conceding goals. The fact that they've lost away at Oxford now as well, another side expected to be down there, is a worry. What was more of a worry though was the performance, because it was beyond one-sided. Derby had 1 shot on target all game. Oxford created so much, and on another day could have won 3 or 4, and I'm sure most won't disagree with that. They really did have so many good opportunities in that match, and in the end, Derby were fortunate to come out with a 1-0 defeat. For Norwich, as we kind of predicted last week, a little bit of a tough time. Liam Manning was haunted by his former club. I'm sure the away fans enjoyed it, but for Norwich, lots of the ball, not a lot of creativity. A couple of good chances, yes, but giving up so many chances on the break. And defensively, they look all at sea at the minute after letting in 3 in the derby and then to play like that at home to Bristol City, very worrying signs. They've lost every home game this season, and they'll be grateful this is on the road. But do you know what? Of the two sides at the minute, I think Derby look more like picking up a result, and I wouldn't be shocked if Liam Manning came under a bit of pressure soon. I'm going to go for the home team to get a priceless win in this one. They drew against good Charlton and Southampton teams. Norwich aren't in as good a form and have relied on Josh Sargent even when they were doing well earlier in the season. So I'm going to go for 2-1 to the home side in this one. I just fancy Derby slightly more. The third game sees two sides separated by just 2 points near the top end of the table. It is Hull City versus Leicester, and you have to give credit to Hull City. A 3-2 win away from home against Birmingham. Yes, of course, the red card with about half an hour to go helped, but they were doing very well before that as well. They gave up an awful lot of chances to Birmingham, who had nearly 30 shots on goal in the end. But we've said this a lot for Hull this season. They're entertaining. They look a threat going forward. They look vulnerable a lot of the time at the back as well, but they created a couple of good chances. They played their part in the game. I think my 2-2 draw wouldn't have been an unfair result, but still, really good effort from Hull City. Good win. Back-to-back for the first time this season, I think, which is really important as well. They're starting to look a half-decent side, and they did it this time without relying on McBurney as well. So definitely positive signs for Hull and a type of team at the minute that their owner wanted to see. Whereas for Leicester, it's much the opposite. They're efficient, they're solid, they're doing okay, they're plodding along. They're unbeaten in the last 6, of course, but 5 of those are draws. Yes, they won away at Swansea, but otherwise they're just struggling for that ruthless edge. And we kind of said it pre-season as we just didn't fancy they had that regular goal threat. And while in the end Pompey didn't have anywhere near as many chances in the match, he did have a couple of very good opportunities to nick a win. So on the balance of play, you maybe say on the top chances of the game it was a fair result, albeit Leicester had a bit of the ascendancy. But I just worry about the cutting edge in the long term. And that's why they've probably drawn 5 games and only lost 1 this year. Has not been able to put chances away in a couple of them. So a difficult game to call this because Hull have been good. I think the one thing we can say, in the last 4 games, bar Hull at home to Sheffield United, they've both scored and conceded. So I think there's going to be more goals in this one. And I just fancy it to be one of those, a bit like Swansea away for Leicester, where maybe they nick a few goals on the break or maybe they take a couple of those chances. So I'm going to go for Leicester to win by the odd goal. I'm going to go by 2-1. As the fourth game again sees two sides separated by 2 points, but teams who had different weekends. It is Ipswich Town versus Charlton Athletic. 2 divisions apart last season, but it does not look like it at the moment. Ipswich beaten on Friday night from Middlesbrough. The perfect score prediction for us, and a really weird game, it's got to be said. Bizarre half of football at the start. Ipswich did have a couple of good opportunities, of course, the penalty being one of them. For Middlesbrough, Alex Palmer was keeping Ipswich in the game. They created some great opportunities too. It's a really decent game of Championship football, it must be said. A couple of disappointments for Ipswich again on the road. And it's become a bit of an Achilles heel for them since their return. We mentioned them being saved against Blackburn. We saw at Bristol City they did okay. Now they've lost to Borough as well. It really is chalk and cheese for them home and away. And to be fair, you could say the same for Charlton, who look rock solid at home most of the time. Rhys Burke, former Luton man, popping up with that crucial second goal just before half-time. And it wasn't actually a great Charlton performance. They weren't brilliant against Sheffield Wednesday, but they got the win. And at this stage of the season, that's an important feat. So really good result for Charlton. And if this game had been the other way round, I probably would have gone for a home win as well. But I've got to back the home team. Ipswich have produced better home performances, particularly against Norwich and against Sheffield United. So I'm going to go for them to nick an uglier game this, because I think Charlton will come to defend. And I'm going to go for Ipswich to win by 1-0, and a crucial win at that against Charlton. As we move on to a couple of sides that have had a very good start to the season, it is Millwall versus Stoke City. 6th v 3rd, both teams flying in the playoff places. And Millwall come into this one off back-to-back wins. Before the international break, they hammered West Brom at home. And then away to QPR, another perfect score for me at the weekend. Said I just had a feeling for them, and they've delivered it again. It was a really weird game because QPR had a lot of the ball, had 4 times the amount of shots, but without creating too many clear-cut opportunities. And Millwall were just ruthless and incisive. 5 shots, 5 on target, scored from a couple of them. Ivanovic, we mentioned, one of the best young players in the Championship when we spoke in the pre-season predictions. I said if they kept him, they had a chance of making the playoffs. And yet again, he's produced a moment in this game. So really impressed with how Millwall have started. But you've got to say as well, Stoke City are doing brilliantly. They've become more solid and robust than they've been probably since they returned to this level. They're not conceding many goals at all. They've got the best defensive record in the Championship, which is miraculous from where they were. A 1-0 win against Wrexham, again, not the most exciting result in the world, not the most exciting performance, but didn't look like conceding, created a chance and scored it. You've got to give them credit. Sorba Thomas, I said, would be one of the signings of the season in the Championship, and under Mark Robins, that man is going to be sensational, and he's proven it yet again at the weekend. It's a really hard game to call. I've no idea where to go with it. There's been a couple of away draws recently for Stoke. They have struggled a bit more on the road. But I'm just going to sit on the fence here because Millwall have been hit and miss at home. I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. As we reach the halfway mark with another game that's pretty tough to call, as Portsmouth host table toppers Coventry City. Coventry maintain the unbeaten run and the run of clean sheets. 5 in a row in terms of clean sheets, 4 of those with victories and 14 goals in that time as well. 2-0 win against Blackburn. As we mentioned, pretty even game, but when you've got confidence, you've got a ruthless edge, and you've got players with quality, you've always got a chance. And while it wasn't one of their best performances in that period, it was another win, which is all that matters. But Pompey are just starting to find a little bit of form. After that week or two of shocking performances and results, yes, the Watford draw was disappointing, but brilliant against Borough, solid against Leicester as well. And to be fair to them, as we mentioned a bit earlier on, while Leicester had most of the chances in that game, Pompey had a couple of great ones, and on another day they could have nicked it and it would have been the perfect away day. However, at home they're pretty solid. I know Coventry are brilliant in recent weeks, but that performance was a little less good. And the unbeaten run's got to end at some point, but I'm not going to bank on it this midweek. I find this game really hard to call. If Pompey are at their best, they can beat anyone at home. If Coventry are at their best, they can demolish sides at the minute. But I'm going to sit on the fence with another Championship's favourite scoreline. For the second game in a row, I'm going for 1 goal apiece, and I may live to regret that here. Into the second half, and 2 sides that both struggled at the weekend. It is Preston North End versus Birmingham City. For Preston, a 2-1 defeat away at West Brom. A disappointing day for them in truth. And if we're being honest, it was a fairly even game. Preston had some of the better chances of the match, but they were done by individual brilliance at times, and unfortunately just didn't take all of their chances. But it's been a solid start for Preston. I think they're going to be comfortable this year. And the fact that they've lost narrowly away at West Brom is not going to define their season, is it? But at home, they've got to maintain their form. They've been very solid for the most part there this year. And they play against a Birmingham side who are really starting to struggle. Yes, that game against Hull City was very peculiar, with a red card, with some very poor defending, and with some weird chances. They were having shots from everywhere. They weren't creating bundles of brilliant opportunities, and they look more vulnerable at the back than they have defensively at home this season, Birmingham. But you could put the red card down to a bit of that in the second half. But given all those 1-0s and 0-0s early in the season, trying to open up now, and they're conceding 3-2-1-3, it's a bit of a worry. And we did say tactically, would it be difficult for Chris Davis as a novice this year? And was he going to get that extra bit of time? I think he's going to need it, but Birmingham at least are starting to score goals now. Jay Stansfield picked up a couple at the weekend. This is a very tough game to call. I could see Preston frustrating Birmingham. I know they've been goals galore at both ends in recent weeks, but Preston at their best are solid. They're disciplined, they're professional, and I think they might nick an ugly game here. So this is one of those where I'm going to go surprisingly low scoring against the form book. I'm going to go for 1-0 to the home side. Preston North End to win and pile the pressure on Birmingham. And the final game on Tuesday night is the feature match at 8 p.m. It is Bristol City versus Southampton, and 2 sides that, well, had sort of differing performances at the weekend, because for Bristol City, they went back and haunted their former manager Liam Manning with a 1-0 win at Carrow Road. They were very good. They gave up the ball, but they created chances. They managed to survive a couple of good ones on their goal as well. But generally speaking, it was a good away day, and one where you can go and create 20 shots on goal, have plenty on target, have chances to win the match. You can't complain. So a really good result for them, gets them back in the playoff mix. Whereas for Southampton, they just can't stop drawing. I've watched the highlights now because my mate's a Southampton season ticket holder. He went down and said, I'm still trying to work out how we didn't win it. It was a great 0-0. And he's sort of right, because they had chance after chance. They were basically locked in the Swansea half for a lot of it. And while they didn't create that many golden opportunities, You just felt it was a constant wave of pressure and it would be coming eventually. And they did miss a couple of good ones in the end. The Swansea goalkeeper made several saves in the match. He was a busy man, but Southampton again failing to win, failing to take their chances. And it's the one thing I didn't expect this year. They've got so much firepower in that squad. You're starting to see some signs of the patterns of play that Will still wants to introduce there. They are looking more aggressive, but they're not taking chances, and that can only go on so long. So it's a big battle between two sides that would like to swap positions really quite quickly, and the only way Southampton can do that is with a win. It's another one, a bit like Bristol City visiting Norwich at the weekend. I just had a feeling they were going to edge it. And I've just got a funny feeling in this one. We have seen a couple of poor home performances from Bristol City recently, against Oxford particularly, also against QPR. They've not won any of their last three at Ashton Gate. I just think Southampton might nick it. 4 points out of 6 on the road in the last two. I'm going to go for them to win 2-1 and maybe take a couple of those chances. It's not going with the form book that, but I've just got a funny feeling about it. As we move on to Wednesday night and the first of 4 games in South Wales, it is Swansea City versus QPR. Swansea were on the other end of that Southampton game where they created next to nothing, basically played for a draw and got it. They were fortunate. The goalkeeper made some good saves. It was a decent away result in the end, but not the best performance, but it's been an okay start for them. For QPR, disappointment at home to Millwall after building that little 5-game unbeaten run, after scoring some goals, after looking better defensively. Gave away a couple in the first half there. And while they got a late goal and they huffed and puffed a bit, they had lots of shots but didn't really create many great opportunities. It was more corners and half chances from the edge of the box rather than brilliant opportunities to score. So maybe a fair result on the balance of play because Millwall were just more clinical in the end. But it does make this one hard to call. They're a mix of low and high scoring games. They're a mix of inconsistent form. And you know what? The only thing I can think to do when I don't know is go bold. So let's go for Swansea to do the same again. I'm going for 0-0 in this one. 3 to go as we move on to Javi Gracia's first home game back as Watford manager. They are hosting West Bromwich Albion, who will be buoyant after returning to the playoff places with a big weekend win against Preston. 2-1 for them as they bounce back from that Millwall game before the international break. And look, we mentioned it before. It was a pretty even game against Preston. If anything, the visitor had the best chance to the game. But West Brom have got individual quality in their team. They've produced moments of magic. They're still creating chances. And while they've not really been entirely convincing under Ryan Mason so far, they're finding a way. And in the Championship, that is so much of the battle. They've not looked like they've been as convincing as sort of, you look at the Coventry at the top who are scoring goals galore and a few others who have looked a constant threat. They've not had the best defensive record in the league, but they're just doing okay. And for West Brom, look, the playoff places is probably the aim for the season. So far, so good on their front. For Watford, a disappointing 1-0 defeat away at Sheffield United in Gracia's return. After 7 points out of 9 with the old manager, it obviously looks a bit bad on that front, but doesn't tell the full story of the game because Watford had a lot of the ball. They did create opportunities, but to only get one shot on target from the chances they made is pretty miraculous, really. They had a couple of glorious ones, which they just didn't take. But defensively, they look vulnerable again. And away from home, they so often do, Watford. Sheffield United had a lot of chances. They created opportunities on the break. And unfortunately for Watford, defensively has been their Achilles heel a lot of this year. They've conceded in all of their last 6 now. West Brom are scoring goals at the minute. But again, I've just got a feeling away from home, West Brom are so hit and miss. You've seen that good win at Norwich and then heavy defeat against Millwall. You've seen the defeat against Middlesbrough. I just think Watford might produce something special. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 home win. The fans will be behind Gracia. I think it'll be a better performance. Watford generally are very good at home. I'm going to go for them to nick this one by a 1-0. Another low-scoring game. As our penultimate game sees us move on to another big battle just outside the relegation zone. It is Wrexham against Oxford United. Oxford with that priceless win at home to Derby. And look, the only disappointment from that game is that it was only 1-0. They were magnificent. It was dominant. They created bundles of chances to score. It should have been 3 or 4. And that's the only concern is where the goals come from. But otherwise, fantastic display from Oxford. And you've got to give them credit. The couple of games where you say they've got to be involved and get results, they've managed to do so for large parts. That big win away at Bristol City, but then they got a point at QPR. They've beaten Derby. They're doing just enough at the minute to keep their heads above the water, which is what the Gary Rowett team so often does. For Wrexham, we've given them credit for looking a bit more solid, but 3 in a row that were 1-1 and now a 1-0 defeat at Stoke. And yes, it was a difficult run against Leicester, Birmingham and now Stoke as well. But you've got to say in that Stoke game, it's probably the most toothless we've seen them look going forward. And whether that was deliberately trying to become a little bit more conservative away from home, try and be a little more cautious and robust or whatever. But Stoke deserved to win that game. Wrexham didn't really look like scoring. And that's going to be a worry for them at the moment because that early season entertainment is starting to dry up. You could argue prior to this weekend, it was starting to get them points as well. I'm sure Phil Parkinson will come under pressure again, which I think is too early because to stay up this season for me is a solid job well done. But that's not going to be the way it's seen, unfortunately, for them. They have, though, got good home performances in them. They've had their moments this season. And Oxford away from home, bar that Bristol City game, have been pretty woeful for the year and a bit since they've been in the Championship. So I'm going to go for the home side to edge this one. I think it will be one of the more entertaining games of the week. I can see it as two sides that fancy their chances of getting a crucial 3 points. And as a result, we might see a thriller. I'm going to go for Wrexham by 2-1. And the final game sees bottom v second as Sheffield Wednesday play Middlesbrough in Wednesday's feature match. Sheffield Wednesday a narrow defeat away at Charlton where, to be fair, they gave a decent account of themselves, conceded a couple of poor goals, but a really decent performance, though the late red card to Horvath obviously a blow. But fantastic effort again, despite the circumstances where, of course, we now know the HMRC winding up petition is going to be called. We'll probably end up doing another What's Going On at Sheffield Wednesday special soon. But on the pitch, they're fighting as hard as they can. And after that off day against a very good Coventry side, they were back to being very competitive. It is going to be tough for them without Horvath, obviously, and with more players out. For Middlesbrough, it was a good performance against Ipswich. It was a good result. It was a really good win for them to get back in the top two. And as we mentioned, it was a crazy game. Ipswich scored that penalty. It probably becomes a very different match. But in the end, it wasn't to be. An own goal a few minutes later and they're on their way. So not the best performance. Again, Borough haven't dominated any games really this season. They've not been battering teams, but they're finding a way to win. Defensively, they're not letting in many. And they're finding a way to score goals. They've got a lot of players who can produce a moment of magic. Morgan Whittaker getting his goal this week as well. There are so many in there that can do it. But away from home, they've not been quite as solid. Yes, they've got a couple of draws against Southampton and Preston. Then they were beaten against Pompey. But this Sheffield Wednesday game, look, on paper, they've got to win it. There shouldn't be too much of a push from these sides. And we mentioned for Sheffield Wednesday, the 3 game weeks are going to be the hardest. They've fought really hard so far in most of them. But I think Borough will just have enough. I don't think it's going to be a big win. I'm going to go for a narrow one to finish off. A 1-0 win for the visitors to keep them in the top 2. So with that out the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for. And the simple news is very low scoring. I've gone for big important away wins for 2 of the relegated sides in Leicester City and Southampton by 2-1 each. I've gone for Wrexham to win the big game at home to Oxford. I've also gone for Derby to beat Norwich to push them in towards relegation trouble. And in that battle of the bottom 3, in the first game, I've gone for the Championship's favourite scoreline between Blackburn and Sheffield United. But those are just my predictions for this midweek action. Do you agree or disagree with my Matchweek 11 scores? Let us know down in the comments. Give us your score predictions too. If you beat or match my overall predictions for the week, you will get a shout out when we return on Thursday to look ahead to the full weekend action in Matchweek 12. If you did enjoy this one, do chuck a thumbs up on the video, subscribe, turn that notification bell on, all of that good stuff as well. A quick reminder again, the FM26 beta is due this week. You can pre-order via my link up in the eye above or the description below for 22% off Steam's price and to help support us as well. And of course, if you did miss any of the manager specials over the last couple of weeks with Watford and Luton in particular, you can find them up in the eye above too. But a massive thank you for watching. I hope your team goes well in midweek. And I'll see you again on Thursday to look ahead to Match Week 12.